What should Ubisoft do in Far Cry 7 to create a great game without being repetitive? Regarding the Far Cry formula, in this video, I want to talk about this topic, explaining the things I consider important for a possible Far Cry 7 in the future. Therefore, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Returning to the topic, it's a reality that the latest Far Cry games, starting with 4, have become somewhat repetitive in terms of the general formula. In some aspects, I think they have lagged, such as the animations. For example, Far Cry 2, despite being an older game, maintains them very well, especially the fire and similar effects, which feel very well crafted. I still don't understand why they discarded all those physics and animations in the newer Far Cry games. They were very good. Now, when I think of Far Cry, I don't envision a perfect 10/10ths game. I think of a fun game with entertaining mechanics and a good, though not excellent, story. However, that doesn't mean that if game after game, the final product ends up being the same, but with a different wrapping, it loses its appeal, no matter how enjoyable it is. Therefore, I believe a great starting point would be an endearing playable character, which wouldn't be too much to ask for, especially since Far Cry 6 gave us a character who at least speaks and has a personality. Let's not forget that in Far Cry 5, the playable character had zero personality and didn't even speak. I believe that a character we can relate to and feel is alive is very important for future Far Cry games, even more so than the main villain, because yes, the villain must be as interesting as the protagonist. In many Far Cry games, as fun as they are, like in Far Cry 5, when they only focus on the villain and neglect the main character, it feels somewhat unbalanced to me. I think it's unrealistic to expect Ubisoft to change the formula that has been working so well for them. That is, defeating the villain's lieutenants and finally finishing off the villain himself. However, I believe if they slightly altered this idea, they could create something more unique and not as repetitive as the previous Far Cry games ended up being. But as I mentioned before, a deep story might not fit with the idea of Far Cry, especially after they opted for something much crazier and more explosive in Far Cry 6. But a change in the paradigm and a new focus wouldn't hurt the saga, being refreshing and new for the upcoming installments. The game mechanics have been evolving throughout the different installments, from details like the healing animations, which were completely removed in Far Cry 5, to mechanics like hunting or the skill tree, which varied from game to game. I think finding that sense of progression throughout the story is very important, feeling the progress and giving us such freedom in the world. Side tasks could be more sophisticated than liberating camps, races, and treasure hunts. As much as they are present, in the end, when you spend many hours playing, they start to feel very repetitive and lack personality. What if everything was more personalized, with essence and a fresh vibe? That would undoubtedly be very positive for the saga. In Far Cry 6, they opted to give us a story in Yara, a representation of Cuba, where we must end Anton Castillo, the main villain, not without first dealing with all his henchmen and planting the idea in our heads that we, as protagonists, are not so different from the villain. These ideas are very cool. They make you think on certain occasions, and I believe they should opt more for that. Forget the filler and tell better stories. Maybe they would give you the chance to choose different sides like Far Cry 4 did but improved. I don't know. Take a bit more risk in terms of storytelling and not always repeat the same thing over and over again. I think if they added all this to the fun gameplay that Far Cry games generally have, they could create a very good product, approaching what Far Cry 3 was, which is still a great game in many aspects today. And it's the repetitiveness in the end that affects the players themselves. And it's not just with Far Cry, but for example, with the same Assassin's Creed saga. Players are looking for new things. They want you to take a risk and try new things in games. The most recent case that comes to mind is Mirage, where as much as they promise to return to the roots of Assassin's Creed, they still continue with the RPG bases. Although understandably, since Mirage was initially going to be a DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. However, it's a good start. I think if they focused more on listening to the fans and the people who genuinely play their releases, they could end up making very good games. People are not stupid, and in the end, they know when companies do things out of passion or for money. Starfield comes to mind, where it ends up being a very mediocre game considering the panorama they painted for us. The graphics engine should already change. The animations, among others, are details that take away a lot of personality from the game and are nothing more than negative points for it, which ultimately distance it from everything that was promised to us. What I'm getting at is that if Ubisoft listened more to the fans and decided to step out of the comfort zone that the latest games end up being, they could give us a great Far Cry 6. Not excellent, but innovative and as entertaining as most are. Because at this point, fans don't want something super elaborate, but something with personality that stands out a bit from the rest. Nothing more. And in that sense, I think they can do it. Speaking of previous installments, Far Cry 3 seems very good to me, and thanks to how well it did for Ubisoft in that installment, they have been reproducing it in all the new Far Cry games, and it's something that almost everyone agrees on. It works. People play and buy it. Therefore, it is obvious that they are going to continue doing the same thing if it works for them. The real question is, until when? Until when will the formula continue to work for them? Especially considering that they are already on the 6th installment of Far Cry. I trust that if Far Cry 7 is being developed, Ubisoft will opt for new formulas, new ideas, new paths, in general, that they give us a game that feels new and fresh, that in the end does not end up being the same as always. I think in that sense, the video game industry should opt to do things thinking of the players, and not so much of the money. We have the example of Larian Studio, which gave us Baldur's Gate 3 and ended up being one of the best games of recent years. Why? Because when creating the game, they always had the player in mind. I also don't mean to completely remove the essence of Far Cry. For that, they should create another game. I simply say that if they want to give that new air to the franchise, they should opt to add new and innovative things to their new releases, keeping the most fun elements, of course, like the companions, weapons, the stealth system. That would be ideal. But at the same time, fixing the problems that the community comments on, such as very basic and stupid enemies and AI, better animations, etc. I think if Ubisoft takes all this into account, they can make a great game. But well, tell me what you think about all this in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like for more content like this, as well as analyses and reviews of both Far Cry and other games. Until the next video,